Imagine a situation where an ordinary evening transforms into a series of unpredictable events. What happens when fate brings two people together in an unexpected place and under unusual circumstances? As Alexander finds himself alone in a hotel with his mother-in-law, the atmosphere between them begins to intensify. What lies behind the fleeting glances and awkward smiles? Could a simple sense of discomfort evolve into something more profound? Alexander glanced at the factory wall clock and frowned. The workday was nearing its end, yet the surrounding hustle and bustle suggested otherwise. What should have been a calm day had devolved into chaos, filled with technical glitches and delays. He had planned to leave early, but unfinished tasks and unforeseen circumstances forced him to stay behind. A feeling of annoyance grew, and the prospect of spending the night in the office hotel was far from appealing. "Hello, Svetlana," he said, answering the phone, trying to mask the weariness in his voice. "Hello, dear," Svetlana's sleepy voice replied from the other end. The carefree tone in her voice sharply contrasted with the tension Alexander was experiencing. "What happened?" she asked. "Everything I set up today went wrong. First the first machine broke down, then the second had software issues, and finally, the network crashed. I hoped to finish everything by the end of the workday, but it didn't happen," Alexander explained, feeling a bit deflated. "So, you're going to stay overnight at the office hotel?" Svetlana asked, a hint of concern and surprise in her voice. "Looks like it." "I'll be staying here anyway," Alexander replied, his voice tinged with fatigue and resignation. The situation was unpleasant, but there was nothing he could do. "I see. Why aren't you home yet?" Svetlana asked with disappointment. "I guess I'll have to spend this night alone here, but it's fine. I have a place to stay, the hotel is always at our disposal," he said, trying to sound optimistic. "Well, alright. By the way, say hello to your mom, she's on duty tonight, isn't she?" Svetlana remarked, trying to change the subject. "Yes," Alexander replied, remembering that his mother was, as usual, on duty. Someone had called in sick, and she had been called in as a replacement. "Kisses. Bye," Svetlana said, trying to keep the conversation light. "Good night, dear." He hung up and put his phone in his pocket, feeling a heaviness in his heart. The day had been long and exhausting, and the thought of spending the night alone did not bring pleasant feelings. Kira Ivanovna, Alexander's mother-in-law, worked as a duty attendant at the office hotel. Her nurse's salary wasn't enough to cover all expenses, so she often took extra shifts. Alexander had always admired her strength and determination. After her husband's sudden death 3 years ago, she had managed to get back on her feet, create a new life, and focus on her work. At 46, Kira still looked attractive, well-groomed hair, a sweet smile, and a slender figure drew glances. He wondered why such a charming woman hadn't found new love yet. Gathering his tools, Alexander headed for the exit, casting a final glance at the empty factory. He felt relieved to see the sky darkening but also noticed approaching dark clouds. The first raindrops began to gently tap on the window. The weather was changing rapidly, and he knew a storm was approaching. He wasn't afraid of the rain, the distance between the factory and the office was short, and he could get a little wet without issue. Approaching the gates, he noticed that the hotel was located on the 5th floor of the building. The team had left the building earlier that morning, leaving Alexander alone. The building, which once seemed full of life, now looked deserted and quiet. Entering the dimly lit corridor, he took the room key his supervisor had given him. The corridor was adorned with old paintings, and the subdued light created a cozy, yet slightly mysterious, atmosphere. Alexander headed to the designated door and opened it. The room was small, a bed, a sofa, a small table, and a bathroom. It was a simple space meant for rest. As he settled in, he noticed something on the floor, women's underwear. Who could have forgotten this, he thought, picking up the item. It was exquisite lace lingerie, and his thoughts involuntarily turned to the woman who might wear it. At that moment, a click sounded, and the bathroom door opened. Kira Ivanovna emerged from the shower cabin with a towel on her head. She hadn't expected to see Alexander there. At first, she didn't notice her son-in-law was already in the room. Turning around and seeing Alexander, she froze in surprise, instinctively trying to cover herself. The shock was palpable. What would happen next? Confused by what was happening, she exclaimed, "How did you get here?" Alexander, visibly nervous and unsure what to say, clutching the intimate garment in his hand, stammered, "The supervisor gave me the key." A tense silence hung in the air. "Would you mind stepping out?" "I need to change," Kira said, trying to maintain her composure, but a slight blush betrayed her embarrassment. "Sorry, Alexander began, about to retreat, but Kira stopped him. "Did you want to return this?" she asked with a smirk, appreciating the comedic nature of the situation. "Yes, of course, I didn't mean to," he hastily replied, tossing the ill-fated item onto the table and quickly leaving the room, his heart pounding. Outside the door, Alexander leaned against the wall, trying to calm himself. The image of Kira Ivanovna with a towel on her head and an expression of extreme astonishment on her face vividly reappeared in his memory. He couldn't shake the thought of her beauty and attractiveness, realizing the full awkwardness of the situation. Sitting in the common area, he tried unsuccessfully to distract himself, but the scene of their encounter continued to haunt him. Just as he was about to grab a cup of coffee and a light snack, Kira appeared, dressed in tight jeans and an elegant blouse that beautifully accentuated her slender figure. "I'm sorry about this misunderstanding. I forgot to mention that the other rooms are occupied. Only the concierge has the keys, but she's not here today," she explained. "So, you're going to spend the night here?" Alexander asked thoughtfully, feeling his heart begin to beat faster at the prospect. "Actually, I can sleep on the sofa so as not to inconvenience you," Kira offered, trying to be polite. "Absolutely not. I can't let such a charming woman like you spend the night on an uncomfortable sofa," he countered, realizing his words surprised Kira. "How about we have dinner together?" Alexander suggested with a playful smile. Kira accepted the invitation, and they settled at the table, sharing a modest dinner and exchanging nervous smiles. A light but rich atmosphere of unspoken words hung in the air. After the meal, Alexander automatically began to clear the table, but Kira quickly stopped him. "Let me do it," she said, taking the plates from his hands. "You can take a shower and get ready for bed." Heading to the bathroom, Alexander couldn't shake the feeling that this night still held surprises. What started as an absurd coincidence could turn into something completely unpredictable. Emerging from the shower, Alexander felt a surge of freshness, but the tension persisted. Looking in the mirror, he saw water droplets still running down his body. The image of Kira Ivanovna reappeared in his mind. He had always considered her a strong and determined woman, but now he saw her in a different light. The unexpected encounter in the hotel room had thrown him off balance. How could this happen? He shook his head, trying to ward off intrusive thoughts. Slipping on a t-shirt and light pajama bottoms, he felt the pleasant texture of the fabric against his skin, as if returning to a state of comfort that seemed lost. Opening the bathroom door, he caught the aroma of freshly brewed coffee and the appetizing smell of something cooking in the oven, reminding him that the night was far from over. Alexander headed to the living room and saw Kira bustling in the kitchen. "You're back already?" she asked, turning to him with a smile. "I prepared a small snack, hope you don't mind." "Actually, I'm very hungry, dinner was just a prelude," Alexander replied, sitting at the table and not taking his eyes off her. The grace and confidence in her movements drew his attention. He couldn't help but admire her beauty and charm even in a work setting. "I hope you like it. It's just pasta with sauce and a light salad. Nothing fancy, but it's all I could find on hand," Kira said, placing a generous portion in front of him. "Looks delicious, thank you," he replied, beginning to eat. The pasta tasted excellent, and Alexander noted that Kira always cooked with soul. "You're always great in the kitchen. What else do you usually cook?" Kira smiled, and a mischievous twinkle appeared in her eyes. "I love cooking traditional dishes, goulash, borscht, and my signature pies are simply incomparable." You absolutely have to try them. Alexander nodded, showing interest. Definitely. And perhaps I can cook dinner for you too. How does that sound? That would be wonderful. Kira replied with genuine joy in her voice, as if opening up to new possibilities. The atmosphere in the room became more relaxed, and Alexander felt at ease. Finishing with the cleanup, Kira announced it was time to prepare for bed. I'm going to sleep. Good night, Alexander. You too. And please, don't hesitate to call if you need anything, he replied, watching her go. As Kira disappeared from view, Alexander couldn't shake the premonition that this night still held surprises. The aroma of freshly cooked pasta still lingered in the air, intertwined with the faint scent of perfume Kira had left behind. Alexander sat motionless at the table, lost in deep thought. Their recent conversation had stirred a certain excitement and confusion within him. What was happening to him? The last thing he expected was to feel an attraction to his own mother-in-law. With a heavy sigh, he tried to distract himself from the intrusive thoughts, but ignoring the growing pull between them became increasingly difficult. Alexander decided he needed to relax and fall asleep. The bed beckoned him, promising lawn for oblivion and a chance to escape his troubling thoughts. Entering the bedroom, he turned on the bedside lamp, its soft light enveloping the room, and collapsed onto the bed with a prolonged sigh. Kira's image still haunted his mind, but he desperately tried to banish it. Lying on his back and staring at the ceiling, Alexander recalled Kira emerging from the bathroom, and a faint blush colored his face. He vigorously shook his head, trying to rid himself of the improper thoughts. Kira was his mother-in-law, and he shouldn't cross the line. The night stretched endlessly, and even watching TV didn't help distract him from the intrusive thoughts about their conversation and the intimacy that had developed between them. He couldn't stop thinking about how attractive Kira looked and the peace he felt in her presence. Her scent seemed to linger in the air, and the image of her radiant smile was firmly imprinted in his memory. Towards morning, exhaustion took over, and Alexander turned onto his side, trying to find a comfortable position, but the thought that Kira was only a few steps away kept him awake. The darkness of the night sharpened his thoughts. Perhaps the loneliness Kira felt was something they could share. Finally, sleep overtook Alexander, and thoughts of Kira gradually dissolved into dreams. However, his subconscious continued to stir him, and the premonition of what the coming night might bring kept him restless. Awakening came with the sound of footsteps in the corridor. A faint light filtering through the window slightly illuminated the room, highlighting its modest yet cozy ambience. Alexander stretched and sat up in bed, trying to shake off the lingering sleep. What's that noise, he wondered. Was it just echoes of his anxiety, or was Kira Ivanovna really awake? Without much thought, he got out of bed, still in his pajamas, and decided to check. Opening the door, he confirmed there was no one in the corridor, but he distinctly heard the sound of running water coming from the kitchen. What could his mother-in-law be doing at such an early hour? Quietly approaching the kitchen, he saw Kira, her back to him, preparing something at the stove. The air was filled with the delightful aroma of freshly brewed coffee and toasted bread. Kira was so engrossed in her task that she didn't notice his approach. Alexander couldn't take his eyes off the scene. The woman he knew as his mother-in-law appeared before him in a new light, a strong and independent person. "Good morning," he said, breaking the silence. Kira sharply turned, startled, but her face broke into a genuine smile when she saw Alexander. "Good morning, Alexander. I thought you were still asleep. I just decided to make a light breakfast." "I hope you like toast," she replied enthusiastically, refocusing on the stove. "I'd love some." "It smells absolutely delicious," he praised, taking a step forward. Watching Kira skillfully and confidently handle the kitchen utensils, Alexander couldn't help but admire her. There was a natural grace and a certain tranquility in her movements. Seeing her so focused and caring was special to him. "Please, have a seat. Everything will be ready in a moment," Kira said, setting out plates. Alexander took one of the chairs, feeling a little calmer as he watched her intently prepare breakfast. "How do you do it? You work so much, Yet you still find the energy to cook? He asked, genuinely surprised. Kira smiled, and a hint of contentment flickered in her eyes. You know, life doesn't stand still, and I've always loved being busy. The kitchen is one of those places where I feel at home. It's a kind of therapy for me. You definitely have a talent. I'd love to learn to cook some of your signature dishes. A pleasant warmth spread within Alexander. This simple act of cooking brought them closer than he could have ever imagined. A few minutes later, Kira placed the ready breakfast on the table. The toast was perfectly browned and smelled appetizing. Alexander took one of the slices and, biting into it, savored its taste. Simply delicious. You really know how to make a great breakfast, he praised. Kira smiled with pleasure, accepting the compliment. Thank you. I always say good food can change your mood. They continued to eat breakfast in pleasant silence, enjoying the food and each other's company. After finishing the meal, Kira began to clear the table, and Alexander again offered his help. Let me help, he said, taking the plates she was about to put in the sink. No need, I can manage, Kira replied, but Alexander was unyielding. He felt their closeness becoming more palpable. They were beginning to discover each other beyond the usual mother-in-law and son-in-law relationship. After their joint efforts in tidying up, Kira, animated by a sudden impulse, suggested they take a stroll. How about a short walk? The day has turned out to be wonderfully splendid, and it seems the heavens have taken pity, ceasing to pour down torrents of water. Alexander, whose heart filled with joy from every minute spent in Kira's company, enthusiastically embraced the idea. That would be absolutely wonderful. A breath of fresh air would do us both good. With each passing moment spent by her side, he felt increasingly at ease, and the thought of a joint walk seemed utterly natural to him. They swiftly changed into outdoor clothes, and Alexander couldn't help but notice how Kira had transformed, as if she had blossomed, donning her best attire. A light blouse skillfully accentuated her graceful figure, and her loose hair framed her face like a halo. Alexander was so struck by her beauty that he was momentarily speechless. He again wondered why such a charming woman had not yet met her life partner. It was obvious that Kira possessed many qualities capable of making any man happy. As soon as they left the building, a gentle breeze greeted them. The sky was cloudless, and the sun generously bestowed its rays, painting everything in warm, golden hues. I suggest we walk to the nearest park, Kira said, pointing in a direction opposite the factory buildings. Excellent idea. I have the fondest memories of that park. I remember spending whole days there as a child, Alexander replied, and they walked together in the indicated direction. During their leisurely stroll, they delved into conversation about their lives, experiences, and interests. Kira shared childhood memories, recounted events that shaped her as a person, and spoke of the difficulties she faced after her husband's tragic passing. Alexander listened attentively, feeling an increasingly strong connection forming between them. It seemed they were discovering each other not just as mother-in-law and son-in-law, but as two kindred spirits sharing common life values and feelings. Sometimes I feel like the world spins at such a dizzying speed that we completely forget what truly matters, Kira remarked, continuing her story. Life consists of ups and downs, but I always try to find beauty in the simplest things. Alexander nodded approvingly, admiring her optimistic view of the world. You have an amazing life philosophy, Kira, it inspires me. He paused for a moment, as if gathering his thoughts, then said, You know, I feel like my life is full of missed opportunities, as if I'm waiting for something, but I can't figure out what. Kira cast a perceptive glance at him. Sometimes, Alexander, destiny puts us in unexpected situations so that we can find our true path. These situations can be painful and uncomfortable, but they are precisely what can lead us to the most amazing discoveries. Alexander felt a slight tremor in his stomach. Their conversation was becoming deeper and more profound, carrying a hidden subtext they could no longer ignore. The distance between them seemed to steadily shorten as they moved forward. Finally, they reached the park and settled on a bench in the shade of a sprawling tree. Look at the foliage, Kira said, tilting her head back. It's as if it's dancing in the wind, and it's so beautiful to watch how nature adapts and changes. We should learn this wisdom from it too. You're absolutely right, sometimes we just need to let go and stop worrying about the future, Alexander replied, admiring the lightness and serenity Kira exuded. A barely perceptible tension hung in the air, yet at the same time, there was an atmosphere of comfort and warmth. It seemed an invisible bond between them was growing stronger and firmer. Deep in conversation, Alexander began to notice small details in Kira's behavior, how she casually played with her hair, how her eyes lit up when she spoke of things that inspired her. He felt an irresistible desire to get to know her better, not just as his mother-in-law, but as a beautiful, mysterious woman. "Have you always been so cheerful?" Alexander asked with genuine interest. "How do you manage to stay positive even in the most difficult times?" Kira chuckled softly. "Life is too short to waste it on negative emotions. I realized that after enduring the hardest trials. When I lost my husband, I felt a part of me died with him. But then I understood that life goes on, and I have no right to just give up without fighting for my happiness." The unbreakable strength in Kira's words deeply touched Alexander. He wanted to protect that strength and, at the same time, become a part of her life. Something within him began to change, his feelings became deeper and more complex. "I admire you," Alexander whispered, his voice barely audible. "You're an incredible woman." The glances they exchanged were filled with unspoken desires and hopes. The atmosphere around them seemed to thicken, becoming more intense and exciting, and Alexander felt an irresistible attraction to Kira, an attraction that, he understood, should not have arisen. After a heavy silence, Kira broke the magical stillness. "I suggest we walk around the park a bit more. I really don't want this wonderful day to end." "With great pleasure," Alexander readily replied. They rose from the bench and continued their walk, but now it was no longer just an ordinary stroll, but something much more significant, filled with deep meaning and hidden feelings. As they wandered along the park paths, Alexander reflected on how unpredictable and amazing life could be. The connection that had formed between them was completely unexpected, yet at the same time, it seemed utterly natural and inevitable. He found himself not wanting this beautiful moment to end, that he was ready to stay there, by Kira's side, indefinitely, far from prejudices, expectations, and social norms. As dusk settled and the day was already winding down, Alexander and Kira involuntarily paused, captivated by the mesmerizing spectacle of the sunset. The palette of celestial colors, where orange and pink hues shimmered, seemed to reflect all the beauty and uniqueness of the moment they were experiencing together. "Alexander, thank you for this wonderful day," Kira said, giving him a sincere and radiant smile. "It was truly special." "Rather, I should express my gratitude. I am immensely glad that we had the chance to spend this time together," Alexander replied, feeling something more profound emerging between them, as their spiritual connection grew stronger and deeper. Upon returning to the hotel, Alexander was overwhelmed by the feelings that had surged within him. The boundaries between societal norms and his own emotions became increasingly fluid and blurred. He had a premonition that the coming night might hold many unexpected surprises. The day was inexorably drawing to a close, and the soft, subdued light of the sunset filtered through Alexander's window into his room, casting intricate shadows on the walls. He sat on the edge of the bed, still lost in the thoughts that lingered after his walk with Kira. The connection that had formed between them was becoming more palpable and strong, challenging established rules and moral principles. Alexander felt confused, yet at the same time, he was overcome with curiosity and genuine interest. What would happen next, after this walk? He desperately tried to distract himself, but thoughts of Kira persistently returned to his mind, as if he stood on the threshold of something unknown, capable of fundamentally changing their lives. He needed time to sort out his feelings, to understand the nature of this attraction, a fleeting weakness or something deeper and more significant. The very thought that he felt an attraction to his own mother-in-law caused, to say the least, bewilderment and embarrassment. In the midst of these reflections, Alexander concluded that he needed to take a shower, to refresh himself and, perhaps, clarify his feelings. Entering the bathroom, he turned on the water and allowed the hot streams to wash over his body, as if they could wash away not only the day's dust but also the confusion that had accumulated in his thoughts. He relaxed, closing his eyes and focusing on the soothing sound of the flowing water. Emerging from the shower, Alexander felt as if a burden had been lifted from his shoulders. Wrapping a towel around his waist, he walked into the room and, opening the door, was utterly surprised to see Kira standing by the window, admiring the view. What was she doing here? Alexander's heart pounded at the sight of her. "Hi, Alexander," Kira said, quickly turning around. "Sorry, I didn't mean to scare you, I was just enjoying the view." "It's all right, the view is indeed captivating," Alexander replied, trying to calm the excitement that had seized him. Her presence simultaneously soothed him and stirred a storm of conflicting emotions within him. Kira smiled and took a step forward. "I thought we could spend this evening together, do something nice after your tough day. What do you say?" Alexander hesitated for a moment. "What do you mean? How about watching a movie? I have a few options. We could make some light snacks and just spend time together," Kira suggested, her eyes lighting up at the idea. "That's a wonderful idea. I'd love to," Alexander replied, feeling a wave of relief wash over him. The thought of spending a little more time with her, even in such a casual setting, invigorated him. However, he couldn't shake the thoughts of their strengthening bond and how it might affect his future. As Kira headed to the kitchen to prepare the treats, Alexander decided he needed to be honest with himself. He had to sort out his feelings. Was this a fleeting attraction or something deeper, capable of growing into something more? Kira was a strong, vibrant woman, and he genuinely admired her. Her ability to navigate life's difficulties inspired him, but he couldn't forget that she was his mother-in-law. After a while, Kira returned with a tray laden with popcorn and sweets. "Here, I hope you like it," she said with a contented smile. "You always know how to make things more enjoyable," Alexander complimented her, taking a handful of popcorn and savoring its taste. They settled comfortably on the couch, and Kira turned on the TV. She chose a light romantic comedy, and soon they were laughing together at the amusing situations on screen. A relaxed atmosphere filled the air, yet there was an underlying tension between them. The glances they exchanged, the shy smiles, everything was imbued with a hidden meaning. Closer to the middle of the film, Kira gently rested her head on Alexander's shoulder. This simple gesture made his heart race. He didn't know how to react, pull away or allow himself to enjoy the moment. Her closeness was both comforting and unsettling. Alexander tried to convince himself it was wrong, but each touch, each glance only strengthened their connection. Kira lifted her head to meet Alexander's gaze and confessed, "You know, you're really very funny. I genuinely enjoy spending time with you. It feels like we can openly talk about things that would normally remain unsaid." Alexander, in turn, quietly replied, "I feel that too, Kira. It's surprising, but it's as if we're discovering new sides of each other." Kira, with a sparkle in her eyes, added, "Yes, sometimes circumstances force us to explore aspects of ourselves we never knew existed. I'm glad we're here together." Alexander was acutely aware of the delicate nature of the moment. The line between what was permissible and what was not became increasingly blurred. What was planned as a casual movie night was transforming into something far deeper. He was tormented by the question, did Kira share his feelings? Was this a fleeting manifestation of loneliness or the beginning of something significant? After the movie ended, silence hung in the air. Kira subtly pulled back but remained close enough for Alexander to feel her warmth. Their eyes met, and he noticed an expectation in her gaze for his reaction. He wanted to say something, but the words seemed to catch in his throat. "Have you ever felt lonely, even when surrounded by people?" Kira suddenly asked, breaking the silence. "Absolutely," Alexander replied, recalling his own experiences. "Sometimes, even when you're with friends and family, loneliness can be all-consuming." Kira confessed, her voice trembling slightly, "That's exactly how I feel sometimes. It occasionally seems like I only exist to give myself to others, but I also need someone by my side." Alexander, his heart pounding, looked into her eyes. "Kira, you're not alone. I'm here for you, and I always will be. Kira smiled, but a hint of sadness flickered in her eyes. You're so kind, I truly appreciate that. Suddenly, acting on impulse, Alexander took Kira's hand, feeling the softness of her skin. The touch was like an electric current, and he realized he didn't want to let her go. If you ever need someone to talk to, I'm always here, no matter what. She looked at their intertwined hands, then gazed intently into his eyes. And if this connection between us becomes something more, what will we do? Alexander felt the full gravity of the moment. He understood they were treading on dangerous ground, yet he couldn't ignore the feelings that were emerging between them. I don't know, Kira, but I do know that my feelings for you. I can't deny them. Kira hesitated, then nodded, as if making a decision. Perhaps we shouldn't worry so much about what might happen. Let's just see where this takes us, without rushing. Alexander felt both relief and excitement, fear and hope. But there was something liberating in their decision to allow themselves to feel. Yes, he replied, smiling at her. The atmosphere was filled with anticipation, and Alexander knew that nothing would ever be the same. What began as an ordinary movie night had turned into a pivotal moment in their lives. The boundary separating son-in-law and mother-in-law was blurring, and he wondered what awaited them. But in that moment, he was ready for new discoveries. Throughout the night, they continued to talk, sharing laughter and intimate thoughts. Fears and doubts gave way to a new understanding of their deepening connection. The idea of a shared journey into the unknown no longer seemed frightening. On the contrary, it was appealing. As he prepared for bed, Alexander couldn't stop thinking about Kira. What did the future hold for them? He was ready to accept any consequences. The night passed peacefully. Moonlight illuminated the sky as Alexander reflected on the events of the past few hours. An air of something new, something he had never experienced before, lingered. The simple act of spending time with Kira had evolved into something profound, defying logic and conventional norms. Alexander couldn't get Kira out of his mind, her strength and vibrancy, combined with her vulnerability. He longed to know everything about her, to understand her fears and hopes. What was this connection that had formed between them? Was it just a temporary escape from loneliness, or the beginning of something more significant? He decided to do something special for her. Why not cook dinner for Kira? After a day full of emotions and revelations, it would be a wonderful way to show her how important she was to him, that he was willing to put in the effort for her. He headed to the kitchen, recalling her advice on favorite recipes. Opening the refrigerator and assessing the available ingredients, his mind started working. What could he prepare to surprise her? A simple but delicious dish would be perfect. As he considered his options, he began gathering ingredients: a little pasta, homemade tomato sauce, some fresh herbs. He mumbled to himself, collecting everything he needed. He was filled with a sense of determination to prepare pasta carbonara, a dish that had always been one of his favorites and, he hoped, Kira would enjoy too. As Alexander began his culinary endeavor, water was already bubbling in the pot, and the appetizing aroma of the sauce began to fill the kitchen. He was filled with anticipation for something special. The scents of sautéed garlic and onion wove into a delightful symphony, instilling enthusiasm in him despite all the recent difficulties. Alexander yearned to create something beautiful with Kira, despite all the obstacles in their path. Just as dinner was almost ready, he heard the sound of the door opening. "Hi, Alexander. What's going on in here?" Kira's voice rang out as she entered the kitchen. Her radiant smile lit up everything around them, and Alexander's heart quickened. "I'm making us a special dinner," he replied, trying to maintain a casual demeanor. "Spaghetti carbonara. I hope you like it." "Wow, you know how to surprise a girl," Kira exclaimed, her eyes sparkling with delight. She approached and began to help him, handing him necessary ingredients and commenting on his actions with interest. As they worked together on dinner, Kira shared memories from her childhood related to food and family traditions. She spoke of how her mother would prepare Sunday lunch for the entire family, gathering everyone around one table. Each story was filled with warmth and nostalgia, and Alexander listened to her recollections with pleasure. It brought them closer, as if he were pulling back the curtain on the most intimate corners of her life. When I was little, I always wanted to help in the kitchen, but I ended up causing more trouble than help, Kira confessed, laughing. It was always complete chaos. But it was a special time. I can imagine. Cooking is an art that brings people together, Alexander remarked, stirring the sauce. And now we're creating our own memories, aren't we? Kira looked at him with a tender smile. Exactly. And I really cherish that, Alexander. When dinner was finally ready, Alexander carefully set the table. He took elegant plates from the cupboard and lit a few candles, creating an atmosphere of coziness and romance. The soft light played on the walls, reflecting the depth of feelings they shared. Did you make all of this yourself? Kira asked, admiring the setting. It looks like a restaurant. I just wanted to make this evening special, he replied, feeling his heart pound as he saw her so happy. I hope the taste doesn't disappoint. They sat down at the table, and Alexander served the dish, watching Kira anxiously as she took her first bite. He held his breath while she chewed, and then her eyes widened with pleasure. This is absolutely delicious, Alexander. You really know what you're doing. Kira exclaimed, taking another forkful. Her joy was infectious, and Alexander smiled broadly, feeling a warmth spread through his body. During dinner, the conversation flowed easily and naturally. They talked about their lives, dreams, and challenges. Kira shared her hopes for a bright future and her desire to meet someone who truly understood her. Alexander was touched by her openness. He wanted to be that person for her. I admire your strength. You've been through so much, yet you keep going. It's inspiring, Alexander said, feeling the need to express his feelings. Thank you, Alexander. Sometimes it's not easy, but I've learned that life goes on no matter what, Kira replied, looking into his eyes with such intensity that his heart beat even faster. After dinner, Alexander rose to clear the table, but Kira stopped him. Let me do it. You cooked dinner, now it's my turn to clean up. But you've already done so much today, he argued, wanting to help, but Kira was firm. Just sit back and relax. You've done a wonderful job. While Kira washed the dishes, Alexander sat at the table and watched her. He couldn't stop thinking about how their relationship had changed. What was once a mother-in-law and son-in-law dynamic had now transformed into something much deeper. He wanted to know her not just as his mother-in-law, but as an intriguing woman. Have you always been so caring? Alexander asked, breaking the silence. It seems like you always put yourself last to take care of others. Kira paused, stopped washing dishes, and looked at him. Sometimes I feel it's my duty to take care of others. I've learned to be strong, but I can't deny that sometimes I feel lonely, and that's hard to deal with. You don't have to carry that burden alone, Kira, Alexander said sincerely. I'm here for you. Not just as your son-in-law, but as a friend. A genuine smile lit up Kira's face, and her eyes reflected sincere gratitude. Alexander, that means the world to me. Opening up to someone isn't easy, but with you, everything feels simpler and more natural, she said warmly. After the cleanup was complete, Kira turned to Alexander with a question. What are your plans for the rest of the day? Maybe we could watch another movie or just talk. I'd be absolutely delighted to continue our conversation, Alexander replied, feeling the palpable anticipation in the air that he could no longer ignore. He yearned to know Kira more deeply, to delve into her hopes and fears, and to share his own innermost thoughts and feelings. They settled back on the couch, and Alexander began to tell amusing stories from his childhood, eliciting laughter with his mischievous antics. Kira laughed with delight, and as they exchanged remarks, the invisible barrier between them seemed to dissolve. You know, I truly cherish these moments. It's so rare nowadays to meet someone with whom you can be completely honest and open, Kira confessed, looking directly into Alexander's eyes. Alexander's heart swelled with warm emotions when he heard those words. I feel the same way, Kira. A special connection has formed between us, and I don't want it to end, he replied sincerely. A faint smile appeared on Kira's face, but Alexander noticed a hidden sadness in her gaze. I want this to continue too, but we should be careful. I don't want this to create any problems between us, she said cautiously. I understand your concerns, but I can't ignore my feelings, Alexander firmly replied. I believe there's something real and precious between us. Kira fell into thought, her face becoming serious. What if this leads us to a point of no return? What will we do then? She asked with anxiety. Let's move gradually, step by step. We don't need to make all the decisions right now, Alexander tried to reassure her. We can explore this together and see where it takes us. Kira slowly nodded, and her gaze softened. You're right. Sometimes you just need to enjoy the present moment and see what comes of it, she agreed. That night, under the moonlight filtering into the room, they shared laughter and intimate secrets, and a new chapter began to unfold in their lives. The relationship they were building promised to be complex and full of challenges, yet it also opened up immense possibilities before them. Alexander understood that no matter what lay ahead, he was ready to walk this path with Kira. After a full day of emotions, Alexander sank into a deep sleep. He dreamed vivid scenes of laughter, candid conversations, and shared moments with Kira. Her radiant smile and perceptive gaze lingered in his thoughts. However, his dreams also held anxiety, the realization that awakening would bring with it a reality where the line between what was permissible and what was forbidden grew increasingly blurred. The morning light, filtering into the room, brought with it a sense of clarity. Alexander rubbed his eyes and looked around. The bed was empty, and he was filled with unease. Where is Kira? A mix of longing and anticipation stirred within him, but also a slight thrill. What awaited them? How would they develop what had just begun to blossom between them? He decided to get up and get ready, prepared for any surprises. As he dressed, thoughts of Kira and how rapidly their connection had changed lingered. What was once exclusively a family relationship was now infused with new energy. He couldn't help but wonder what Kira was doing now and if she was thinking of him. Stepping out of the room, he smelled the delightful aroma of freshly brewed coffee. The kitchen was bathed in soft morning light, and Kira stood by the stove, preparing breakfast. She was dressed in a comfortable blouse and jeans and looked as natural and beautiful as ever. Alexander paused for a moment, admiring the scene, before approaching her. Good morning, he said with a smile. Good morning, Alexander. I was just wondering when you'd wake up, Kira replied, turning to him with a radiant smile. I hope you slept well? Yes, I slept soundly. I even dreamed about you, he confessed. As the words left his lips, Alexander felt a slight embarrassment, but Kira only smiled wider. Oh really? I hope it was a pleasant dream, she quipped, pouring coffee into 2 cups. Absolutely. How did you manage to prepare all this so early? Alexander asked, watching her move gracefully around the kitchen. Nothing special, just some toast and fruit, but I thought you'd like a light breakfast, Kira replied, setting the plates on the table. As they sat down for breakfast, Alexander felt that the tension from the previous night still lingered in the air, but now it felt more like anticipation than awkwardness. A new understanding had emerged between them, one that didn't require words but was felt by both. Kira, with a mischievous sparkle in her eyes, as if anticipating something special, inquired about Alexander's plans for the day, bringing a juicy piece of fruit to her lips. In response, Alexander, with hope in his voice, suggested they spend another day together, enjoying the beautiful weather. Kira's delight was immediate. She proposed visiting a local market she had long wanted to see, or returning to their favorite park. Alexander, energized by the prospect of a shared adventure, enthusiastically supported the idea. The thought of new discoveries in Kira's company filled him with joyful anticipation. After a quick breakfast, they were already at the doorstep, ready for new experiences. Kira's light floral dress beautifully accentuated her grace and beauty, making Alexander's heart beat faster. In her presence, he felt incredibly happy. Arriving at the market, they plunged into a kaleidoscope of colors and sounds. Stalls overflowed with fresh vegetables, fruits, and other local delicacies. The picturesque market atmosphere charmed Alexander, and Kira seemed to be in her element, chatting animatedly with vendors and showering everyone with her radiant smile. Kira, enthusiastically pointing at exotic fruits, suggested they try them. They happily sampled various fruits, laughing infectiously and enjoying the flavors. Alexander felt increasingly at ease in Kira's company, sensing their bond strengthening with each passing minute. She shared memories of each fruit, recounting how she used to buy them in her youth. With a nostalgic smile, Kira recalled how she loved making fresh juices from these fruits, adding that her late husband always admired her knack for choosing the best produce. Hearing Kira mention her husband, Alexander felt a pang of sadness, but at the same time, he realized she was opening up to him, sharing an important part of her life. Alexander, trying to maintain a casual atmosphere, kept the conversation going, noting that Kira indeed had excellent taste in fruits. Kira continued her story, recounting how she used to go to the market with her mother when she was a child, who taught her how to choose the ripest and most delicious fruits. A simple walk through the market turned into a heartfelt conversation about family, memories, and growing up. Kira's candor astonished Alexander and only deepened his attraction to her. After several hours spent at the market, Kira suggested they take a break and grab a bite to eat. They found a cozy eatery with home-style cooking and settled at a table, enjoying simple but delicious dishes. The conversation flowed easily and naturally. Kira, looking at Alexander with a smile, confessed that she hadn't expected to feel so much joy again after everything she had been through, and that it meant a great deal to her. Alexander sincerely replied that he felt the same way, adding that being with her was a liberating feeling. After lunch, they decided to stroll through the park. Sunbeams, filtering through the tree leaves, created a magical atmosphere. Kira suggested they walk to a nearby lake, and Alexander gladly agreed. On their way to the lake, they shared their dreams and hopes for the future. Kira spoke of her desire to travel and discover new places, while Alexander shared his passion for technology. He had never before experienced such emotional closeness with anyone. Upon reaching the lake, Alexander was struck by its beauty. The water, like a mirror, reflected the sunlight, and ducks glided smoothly across its surface. Kira's smile, as she watched the birds, illuminated everything around them. Kira, pulling out her phone, suggested they take a memorable photo of the day. They posed together, laughing and being silly. This simple moment was filled with happiness. Looking at the picture, Kira exclaimed that it was perfect and asked Alexander to send it to her as a keepsake. Alexander's heart filled with warmth at the sight of a happy Kira. He promised to send her the photo. They continued to take pictures, capturing laughter and spontaneous moments, feeling an incredible sense of freedom. Having enjoyed the beauty of the lake, Kira suggested they walk along a path, looking at Alexander with enthusiasm. After a brief "let's go," spoken by Alexander, they headed along a winding path, immersing themselves in nature's embrace. Their walk was accompanied by lively conversations and ringing laughter, and Alexander noticed that with each passing minute spent with Kira, he felt increasingly at ease. The burgeoning connection between them took on the contours of something beautiful and unique with every step they took. Her presence became more palpable and compelling. Alexander realized this wasn't just physical attraction, but a deep shared understanding, a bond that connected them in ways he had never known before. During their walk, Kira shared her innermost hopes for the future. "I genuinely aspire to find someone who will reignite the spark of life within me, with whom I can share my destiny," she confessed openly, and Alexander felt his heart pound in his chest. This was an exceptional chance to open up and reveal his own feelings. "Kira, I'm also starting to realize that I long for something more than just a friendly relationship," Alexander whispered, his voice barely audible. The moment was charged with tension and trembling anticipation. Kira looked at him, her gaze deep and discerning. "Do you really feel that way?" "Yes, I do. What we're creating together is something special, and I want to continue exploring it with you," he stated confidently, feeling his heart race. She gave him a smile that radiated joy and hope. "I want that too, Alexander. I'm ready to see where this takes us." And so, under the sun's rays, surrounded by nature's splendor, Alexander and Kira took a step towards an uncertain but opportunity-filled future. What began as a mother-in-law and son-in-law relationship was now blossoming into something far deeper, and they were both ready to explore this new path together.